my name is Charlie Williams. We welcome you listeners to Child Welfare Navigator. Child Welfare Navigator is a child abuse prevention program of Love Focus International Association. The main purpose is to promote public awareness in supporting families and keeping children safe in the community. If you are listening to this informative dialogue, maybe you are involved with the child welfare system, or perhaps you know somebody who is, or you are interested in knowing about the system and its work in supporting families and keeping children safe. Child abuse and neglect is a serious concern to every community. The child abuse that takes place in 1 year in the United States will cost the nation $124 billion over the victims' lifetimes, according to a report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. No child should ever be the victim of abuse or neglect, nor do they have to be. The human and financial costs can be prevented through prevention of child maltreatment, said Linda C. Digitis, former director of CDC National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. More than 740,000 children and youth are treated in hospital emergency departments as a result of violence each year. That is more than 84 every hour. More than 3 million reports of child maltreatment are received by state and local agencies each year. That's nearly 6 reports every minute. Each community has a moral and legal obligation to promote the safety, permanency, and well-being of children. This responsibility includes responding effectively to child maltreatment. At the state and local levels, professionals assume various roles and responsibilities ranging from prevention, identification, and reporting of child maltreatment, intervention, assessment, and treatment. Child Protective Services (CPS) agencies, along with law enforcement, play a central role in receiving and investigating reports of child maltreatment. To protect children from harm, CPS also relies on community members to identify and report suspected cases of child maltreatment, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and psychological maltreatment. Many community professionals, including healthcare providers, mental health professionals, educators, legal and court system personnel, are involved in responding to child abuse and neglect and providing needed services. Furthermore, community-based agency staff, substance abuse treatment providers, domestic violence victim advocates, clergy, extended family members, and concerned citizens also play important roles in supporting families and keeping children safe. Moreover, Child Welfare Navigator helps you to understand the laws and policies within the child welfare system, which direct the actions and decisions of CPS workers, the police, lawyers, and the courts. You will hear family members talk about their experiences with agency workers, the service systems they work in, their roles, and what families could expect when they are involved with child protective services. Finally, you will learn various ways to advocate for children and families' rights and responsibilities of a parent or a caregiver involved with the system. Although the Child Welfare Navigator is comprehensive in scope and touches on major issues, it cannot reflect all the detailed information related to this complex problem. It is intended, therefore, as a starting point to understanding the work Child Protective Services, the courts and other child and family serving agencies do to ensure the safety, permanency, and well-being of children.
What does Child Protective Services do? Child Protective Services, CPS, is a specialized part of the child welfare system, which focuses on families in which a child has been identified as a victim of abuse, or in danger of child abuse or neglect. This also may be called child maltreatment. State laws require Child Protective Services agencies to do the following: 1. Take reports from people who believe a child has been abused or neglected. 2. Find out if abuse or neglect has occurred. 3. Ensure that there is a plan in place to keep children safe. 4. Provide services to families to ensure their children's safety. What is child abuse and neglect under federal law? A federal law called the Child Abuse Protection and Treatment Act says that child abuse and neglect is any recent act, or failure to act, on the part of a parent or caretaker which results in death, or serious physical or emotional harm, or sexual abuse or exploitation, or presents an imminent risk of serious harm. There are several types of abuse and neglect. Some states may have slightly different definitions for abuse and neglect. How do you define physical abuse? Physical abuse is causing injury to a child by beating, kicking, biting, burning, shaking, or other ways of harming the child. Sometimes even when a parent does not intend to hurt the child, a child's injuries may be legally labeled as abuse. For example, the injury may have been the result of over-discipline or physical punishment. The law holds the parent responsible for the safety of the child, even when someone else in the home causes the injury. How do you define child neglect? Child neglect is failure to provide for a child's basic needs. This includes a child's physical, educational, medical and emotional needs. Sometimes neglect of a child happens when a parent has a drug, alcohol abuse problem or some form of mental illness. When you do not have enough money to take care of a child's basic needs does not mean a parent is being neglectful. It may mean that the parent needs assistance. When deciding if a child is neglected, CPS worker usually considers cultural practices or differences. This is to make sure that a family is not wrongly accused of abuse or neglect. How do you define sexual abuse? Sexual abuse includes any type of sexual activity or sexual contact by a parent or other caregiver with a child. Taking advantage of a child through prostitution or pornography is also considered to be sexual abuse. How do you define emotional abuse? Emotional abuse includes actions of a caregiver that can hurt a child's emotional health, such as screaming and name-calling. Other acts such as rejecting or withholding affection are also forms of emotional abuse. What is child abuse under California law? California Penal Code 273D law defines child abuse as the willful infliction of a cruel or inhuman corporal punishment or any injury that results in a traumatic condition. Simply, this means that you may be charged with California child abuse if you intentionally harm a child, and it results in a visible or internal injury. You do not have to cause the child great bodily injury or harm. You could be charged, even in a minor injury. Examples of corporal injury or punishment on a child include, but are not limited to, hitting, punching, slapping, or kicking a child, pushing a child, shaking a child, choking a child, burning a child, throwing an object at a child. Spanking a child is typically excluded from California child abuse law, as parents do maintain a right to discipline their children reasonably, in the manner they see fit. The bottom line is you will likely be prosecuted for corporal punishment on a child if you commit any physical act that results in injury to a child.
Why was the child welfare system created? The child welfare system was created to help every child have a safe and secure home life. This responsibility has been given to public child welfare agencies, but they cannot do it alone. The courts, private child welfare agencies, and other service network, such as mental health, substance abuse, healthcare, education, and domestic violence, are all partners in serving children and families who come to the attention of the child welfare system. The public child welfare system is responsible for responding to reports from people in the community who think that children are being abused or neglected, helping families solve the problems that cause abuse or neglect, helping children to be safe and secure, preventing separation of children from their families, assisting families so their children can return home when children have been separated from their families to be safe, ensuring that children receive adequate care while they are away from their families, finding another suitable permanent home for children who cannot return home. To accomplish these goals, the agency works with families to identify their strengths and needs. The agency helps families find the services and supports that they need. Can you tell me why the child welfare system should be involved with families? The major role of the child welfare system is to ensure the safety, permanency, and well-being of children. The law in most states gives the child welfare system the responsibility for responding to, and following up on reports and calls, about the safety and risk of harm to children in the community. If a child is not safe or has been harmed at home, the Child Welfare Agency will provide services to ensure that the child is safe. It will also offer services to the family to help them if the child is at risk of harm.
I got involved with Child Protective Services when my son had issues with his teacher for a couple of months. I tried everything I knew to make him behave, but he got into trouble almost every day. My husband intervened, feeling that I was ineffective. He began his good spanking method. The spankings became more violent and lasted longer. I stepped into the middle several times only to be told to stay out of it. I tried talking to my husband several times when he was calm, but he dismissed my concerns. One day a CPS worker appeared at my door. She explained that a report had been made regarding my son, that there were multiple bruises on his back and legs, during their interview and examination. The CPS investigation only made my husband angrier. He felt they were intruding and had no right to dictate how he should discipline his children. After numerous attempts at counseling, he spanked my son again, leaving a large bruise. CPS came and removed my child. I felt my stomach tighten and my umbilical cord pull away, as my son left our home. I cried in pain because they were doing something that I believed only God could do, take my son away from me. My husband was arrested and my son went into foster care. They explained that my son would remain in care until I could guarantee his safety. I was left with the choice of having my husband released so that he could go to work because I had no job, or having my son return home and leaving my husband in jail. When I chose to have my husband released from jail, I was accused of being a horrible mother by the judge. I have never felt so torn apart in my life, and did not know where to turn for help. All stories that involve child abuse and placement do not have sad endings. Often Child Protective Services interventions help families move to a better place. Certainly, the process is painful, long, and grueling. As I look back on the events that occurred, I know that I am a better mother and my children are better, for the time spent on fixing past wounds. These wounds were impeding my chance to be the good mother that I desperately want to be. Shortly after my son was placed into care, our caseworker offered the option of having a service called Family Reunification, as a method of returning my son home. We agreed to a 24-hour-a-week intervention, so that my son could come home. The service began with an intake meeting. The therapist and her supervisor visited our home to assess our needs. 3 years later, I had finally worked through the root of my issues, that I was a victim of incest in my own childhood. The thing that was impacting most on my ability to be an effective parent was the fact that I had not experienced good parenting myself. Having never been protected, I had no idea of how to protect my children. Having had a mother that ignored her husband's behavior, I learned to ignore my husband's behavior. Although I certainly wished that I had not had to endure the pain and trauma that resulted from the involvement of the Child Protective Services, it did in fact help me change my behaviors, and become a mother capable of protecting and nurturing my children. I was forced to reconcile my past in order to move forward to a brighter future. I had to recognize that it was not about my child's behavior, it was about my behavior and the changes I needed to make. I am better, and now they are better because of my involvement.